What's going on? It's fight season MMA, and today I want to do a UFC rankings video on the highest IQ fighters in the UFC organization right now. Let's get right into the video. At number 10, I want to start with Ilia Topuria. And Ilia Topuria is really a special talent within the UFC organization. He just beat Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298 back in February of 2024. And this fighter is so good. And the reason I have him at number 10 on my high IQ list is because of his ability to be able to mix up the takedown threat with the striking ability. You look at the fight with Alexander Volkanovski where he did end up getting that knockout, and he was perfectly cutting off the cage and perfectly reading Alexander Volkanovski to perfectly time that knockout, which was something of it was an absolute masterpiece. And Joe Lopez, Alexander Volkanovski's coach, saying that he got knocked out because of a fluke is absolutely wrong. Ilia Topuria lured Alexander Volkanovski into that trap and ultimately got the knockout because of it. Ilia Topuria is such a good grappler. He's on the ground. He's probably one of the best high-level IQ fighters in the UFC organization. And his IQ to put everything together and to intertwine and weave it perfectly is something that you don't see every day. At number 9, I have Islam Makhachev, and Islam Makhachev is truly a special talent in the UFC organization. He's currently the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC, and that is shown through his fighting IQ. You look at his last fight against Dustin Poirier, where he did get that ankle pick in the last round, go straight into a Darce. He chains attacks together that no one would ever think to chain together, which makes it so hard for the opponent to be able to see it and to be able to figure out. You look at his fight against Alexander Volkanovski, where he was conditioning that body kick for the entire first half of the first round. And what did he do? About 3 minutes into the fight, clipped him with that head kick and knocked him out cold. Islam Makhachev is one of the highest IQ fighters in the UFC organization, and that is shown because of his number 1 pound-for-pound ranking. You can't be number 1 pound-for-pound in the UFC organization and have a low IQ. He truly is able to intertwine every single facet of his game together to make it so hard for opponents to be able to identify and to be able to stop his attacks coming in the way. At number 8, I got Max Holloway, and Max Holloway is he's so calculated in every little thing he does. He always knows his position in the cage. If you've ever noticed in a fight, he always knows where he is, especially in that end of the first round versus Justin Gaethje. He understood that he was on the fence, that Justin Gaethje was closing in, and so what he do, he threw a spinning back pick right to the face and broke Justin Gaethje's nose. This is something that it gets overlooked in Max Holloway's ability. You think about him as one of the greatest boxers in the UFC. Look at that fight against Calvin Kattar, which, not saying he didn't have any IQ involved, but was some of the best boxing the UFC has ever seen. But Max Holloway's ability to chain uncharacteristic techniques together, be able to understand his position in the cage at all times, and to be able to outsmart opponents with their location, as well as be an absolute bad human being in the octagon, especially with that knockout over Justin Gaethje. Max Holloway deserves the number 8 spot on this list. Number 7, we got Tom Aspinall. And what's funny is you look at John Jones and Tom Aspinall, and they're some of the highest IQ fighters in the heavyweight division. And after them, there's really no high IQ fighters left in that heavyweight division. But Tom Aspinall is such a high IQ fighter. You look at his fight against Alexander Volkov, where he went in there and he got the arm twist, I think it's called, against Alexander Volkov, because he knew that Volkov was bigger than him. His striking was really good, and Volkov's grappling is not the best. Tom Aspinall knows the game of mixed martial arts, and he knows how to chain every single attack perfectly together, as well as he knows how to incorporate those takedowns to keep his opponent guessing. He is such a good fighter, and you look at that fight against Sergey Pavlovich, where he did get the knockout in under it was like a minute and 7 seconds in that fight, and he was able to dart in so quickly. He knew Sergey was the slower fighter, and he also knew that Sergey had a longer reach than him, so he had to stay on the outside. And he knew every single characteristic and every single ability to use to be able to get the finish on Sergey Pavlovich. Tom Aspinall's IQ is one of his biggest assets, and that is going to be something that carries him through the heavyweight division and ultimately possibly becomes one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. At number 6, I have Kamaru Usman, and you look at Kamaru Usman's title reign, and you understand how his IQ is one of the most, some of the highest in the UFC organization. His fights with Colby Covington, even his second fight with Leon Edwards, where he did get knocked down at the end, but that entire fight, he was deploying strategies of striking with Leon, and as soon as Leon would throw something, he would go in for the takedown, and he's one of the biggest chess matches to solve in the UFC organization. Kamaru Usman's wrestling ability is some of the best that the UFC has ever seen. We all know that Kamaru Usman really isn't really a submission artist, but his ground and pound and control time is absolutely insane. And what's crazy is since Kamaru Usman has been in the UFC, his striking is been improved to an elite level. You even look at that fight against Khamzat Chimaev, where yes, he did lose on the cards, and he did lose on his record, but really, he stepped into that fight on 10 days' notice for a 3-round Kona main event halfway across the world, and he possibly could have 18-18 Khamzat Chimaev, and that is something absolutely crazy to me, to where that he was able to step into the octagon and beat Khamzat Chimaev possibly on 10 days' notice and still come out as one of the, and still come out unscathed and beat one of the best, hardest to solve puzzles in the UFC organization right now. Kamaru Usman is truly a special fighter, and that IQ that he possesses allows him to tie in every little thing perfectly together. At number 5, I got Leon Edwards, and Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman, both of those fights were some of the highest level chess matches the UFC has ever seen. Leon Edwards is, his IQ is solely based off his striking ability into where to place strikes and what combinations to throw. You look at these fights against Kamaru Usman, and Usman was trying to close the distance, and Leon Edwards knew the wrestling threat was there, and he used that range and that perfect technique to defend off Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards might be the greatest striker in the UFC right now, and 100% Leon Edwards has the best technique in the UFC right now. Every little thing that he throws is perfect. Every little hook he throws, perfect. Every kick he throws, perfect. Leon Edwards is such a special talent, and that is fully embedded within his IQ, which is able to manipulate different combinations, body technique, and body structure to be able to ultimately gain an advantage over opponents. Leon Edwards is 100% the 5th highest IQ fighter in the UFC organization. At number 4, I got Alex Pereira, and Alex Pereira is such a special talent. We all will know that he's knocked out Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, and Yuri Prochazka again in his last 3 fights. He's knocked out Israel Adesanya. He's beat the likes of Jan Blachowicz and Sean Strickland within the UFC, and that all stems from his IQ. I was watching the Sean Strickland knockout yesterday again, and I was so baffled of how you could even defend Alex Pereira's ability. He threw this sweeping leg kick that you had no idea was coming, and he missed and ultimately spun him around. But then Sean Strickland was coming close. Alex Pereira literally barely stepped, loaded, and threw that left hook and absolutely decapitated Sean Strickland. He is one of the highest. He's one of the most fun fighters in the UFC and one of the most powerful. But if you don't have an IQ on how to use it, it is truly, it's not useful at all. You look at this fight against Yuri Prochazka, where the head kick knockout, Yuri thought it was a body kick, but Alex Pereira just put a little bit more effort and a little bit more time to send that thing right to the head, knocking Yuri out cold. Ultimately, Alex Pereira is the 4th highest IQ fighter in the UFC organization, and that is 100% shown through all of Alex Pereira's fights. Number 3, I have Corey Sandhagen, and you might think that this ranking is crazy, but if you watch some of Corey Sandhagen's fights, you know that he is one of the highest IQ fighters in the UFC organization. The fight I want to go touch on is the fight against Marlon Vera. Chito Vera lost every single round in that fight, handily. Now, there was one ref who gave it 48-47 Chito Vera, but that was one of the worst scorecards of all time. The other 2 refs scored at 50-45 to Corey Sandhagen, and the reason that Chito could never get started in that fight wasn't because he was a slow starter. He was being overloaded by information that he has never seen before to ultimately gain him an advantage inside the octagon. Corey Sandhagen is so special. His ability to switch stances, his ability to threaten with the takedown, and have some of the best striking in the UFC at hand. Corey Sandhagen's ability to, like I said, switch up techniques, switch stances, to cut off different angles, and do every little thing perfect is going to allow him to have success against any UFC fighter within the UFC organization. And this ranking at the number 3 highest IQ fighter in the UFC right now is truly validated because of this skill. Number 2, I have Dricus du Plessis, and solely Dricus is the champion off of his IQ. Dricus is not one of the best fighters technically in the UFC. He's got some power and he's a good wrestler, but Dricus du Plessis' IQ is so high. You look at his in-fight adjustments that he's able to make, and you look at that fight against Robert Whittaker, and Sean Strickland, where I want to highlight in between rounds that he understand that against Sean Strickland, he was getting beat with that jab, and that he understood that he had to go for the takedown more, and he had to threaten with different activities to be able to avoid Sean Strickland's jab. And what did he do? He probably won rounds 2, 3, and 4 off of that, considering that he was able to make that adjustment really quickly, and it took Sean Strickland to a little bit longer to make that adjustment, as well as the Robert Whittaker fight, where he was able to understand that Whittaker was doing his blitz, and then he needed to fall off the counter and throw the jabs a little bit more, and to be able to study Jared Cannonier's fight with Robert Whittaker to where Cannonier was catching him with some jabs, and to be able to watch film and identify Whittaker's weaknesses before the fight to go in there and ultimately get the win. Dricus du Plessis is single-handedly a champion off of his IQ, and that validates him at the number 2 highest IQ fighter in the UFC right now. And at number 1, it's a fighter that you guys would never expect, and that is Jon Jones. Jon Jones, for his entire UFC career, being one of the greatest, if not the greatest UFC fighter of all time, is solely based off his IQ. Jon Jones's body is absolutely gifted. You look at him at light heavyweight, he had this unnatural frame, but he might have all the skills in the world, but if he didn't have the IQ of all time, he couldn't have gone on his crazy win streak. And Jon Jones's IQ was some of the highest within the UFC organization. His ability to use his takedowns, to use his length, to use his striking, to use his defense, to be able to do everything, to intertwine everything flawlessly within the UFC organization is something that is so hard to do, and Jon Jones did it perfectly to go on this incredible win streak. Ultimately, I don't think Jon Jones is in the GOAT conversation as much if he wasn't able to integrate his IQ more than what he did. Jon Jones is so special, and he is the number 1 highest IQ fighter within the UFC organization. Thank you guys so much for watching my UFC rankings video of the highest IQ fighters within the UFC organization. If you agree or disagree with the list, please leave a comment down below, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. And if you enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like and subscribe, especially subscribe. I noticed that 99% of the people who watch this video don't press the subscribe button, so it would mean a lot if you guys took a little bit of time to subscribe so you guys could be notified for more videos coming very soon. If you guys enjoy the comment, like I said, show support, leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys very, very soon with more UFC content.